Hi everyone, I hope I'm audible and visible to all of you. Could you give me a quick yes if you can see and hear me? And then we'll start off. I think there seems to be a connection issue. If you can hear and see me, can you give me a yes? Awesome. Hi Hamza. So I'm presuming all of you can see and hear me. That's cool. So welcome to today's session where we are going to talk about tokenization of art on the blockchain. Now, art is a fairly straightforward use case because what happens here is we are not talking about digital art NFTs, which is a very common concept you must have heard about, but that has its own set of problems because it's very difficult to establish some kind of a value for a purely digital piece of art, right? It doesn't really carry much rights with it. People can easily copy paste and keep that image with them. So what we are talking about is physical art. So let's take an example of something like the Mona Lisa painting, which is one of the most expensive and best known pieces of art in the world. Now, it's not been traded for a very long time, so we don't have an accurate price for it. But based on the insurance value that the museum has taken, the Mona Lisa painting is valued at $1 billion. Now, what could happen? One scenario that we can look at is the museum in Paris, which holds it and which is the current owner. What they can do is they can tokenize it. Let's say they tokenize it into 1 billion tokens of $1 each. People like you and me can then buy that $1 token and we become part owners of that painting. Now, the painting remains in the museum, so it's safe and we can trust the museum as a custodian. And over time, the painting is also generating revenue because when people come to see it, they are paying some kind of a fees to have a look at the painting, for example. That money, a part of it can come to us as token holders. And as the value of the painting goes up over time, the value of that $1 token of ours could increase. Now, as you've obviously understood from this, the biggest issue that is going to come when we talk about tokenizing art is the custodian. Where are we going to keep the painting? And that custodian has to be somebody that we can all trust. So obviously, it has to be a very trusted third party which is going to hold it. Now, ideally, the painting should be in a museum scenario where it is also going to generate additional revenue for the viewing fees. However, even if it is lying in a warehouse where no one can view it, but it is safe and the insurance is done properly, in that scenario it could work in both ways. Now, obviously, do put in your questions here on the side so I can answer them. But what do you guys feel? Does it make sense to you? Is physical art or maybe things like sculptures, is that something that you would actually look at investing in? Now, as of today, when we talk about the various luxury collectibles, so in fact, very recently there has been this report about luxury collectibles. So it's an annual report that comes out. Now, usually what we see in luxury collectibles is one is art, the second is cars, the third is watches, and the fourth is whiskey and wine. So these are usually the most popular luxury collectibles in the world. So what do you guys think? Are many of you bullish on art? You can give me a yes. If you're not, maybe you could put in your reason about why you don't think art is a good use case for tokenization. Someone says without insurance value increasing. So that's a good point. So now when we look at the Mona Lisa, calculating the price, the insurance was actually taken a long time ago. At that time, it was valued at 100 million. But then as of today, it is considered equivalent to the $1 billion valuation. Now, see, the value of the painting ideally over time would go up, and logically, then the insurance amount would also go up. So that does create one kind of a problem. How do you how do you collect this insurance amount from the investors? Because see, once you have bought the token, it is lying in your wallet. Now, how do people or how does the museum take more money from you, saying that now the insurance has to be renewed. So that kind of becomes slightly difficult, because especially in the world of blockchain, we have a lot of privacy, anonymity. So the museum may not even know who you are. So how are they going to approach you and say, okay, you know what, pay more money for the insurance? So that's going to be one issue, definitely. Another issue that is going to arise in this scenario is, suppose the museum wants to sell the painting to another museum. What do they do in that scenario? So would they allow all the token holders to vote for it? So in that case, the token would also function like a governance coin, and then you would vote whether you want to approve the sale or not, because you have to make sure that the new buyer is also equally safe and trusted. If the custodian has to be changed, that also is another issue that we have to look at. So what do you guys feel? Any other questions on this? uh, what token and which blockchain? So, well, it depends. Now, ideally, you would create a physical painting not as a non fungible token, because that means we're only talking about one owner. So, we would ideally make this as a fungible token, which would have, say, a million or a billion fractions in it, because it's not one single person who's going to buy this entire expensive piece of art. So ideally it would go as a fungible token. Now the blockchain, again, when we talk about tokenization, usually we don't do this on a public blockchain or a permissionless blockchain, because of KYC, anti-money laundering, and other legal compliances are not possible there. And ideally this would happen on a permissioned blockchain. There's another interesting question. How would you correlate between gold bonds and art as an investment? So, well, that's a very good question. Although they are fundamentally very different assets. When we talk about gold, it's a commodity which kind of survives on its own for centuries. It's a metal, right? So, even if it is not kept very properly, even if it is buried in the ground, it's not really going to get damaged. However, when we talk about art, it is very easy to damage it. Now, if it's an oil painting, it would still last longer. But what if it's a watercolor, or what if it's some kind of a sculpture, which is, let's say, made out of plaster of Paris? It could get damaged very easily. So while in gold, we do need a custodian to hold it, we are not so worried about the damage. Of course, there is always a threat of the theft happening, but damage is not really something we are so worried about. But when it comes to art, damage is a very major issue. So our insurance premium is going to be higher, and there is going to always be that risk. What if the art gets damaged and it could end up losing its entire value? Another issue is, what if the art turns out to be fake? So at the time when it was sold, we believed it was real, so everyone paid a premium price, and later it is found that the art is actually fake. So that's another very unique problem which would come in art but not really in gold. In fact, that is why a lot of people say whiskey is liquid gold, because they kind of try to compare it to gold, that you just leave it in a place and over a period of time the value goes up. So that way, even the value of art goes up, but art has these peculiar problems with it. Let me take another question. If the museum does not know me, how will I get my royalty over my investment? That's a very good point. So now let's take an example like Bitcoin. Now, let's say the value goes up over time, and the token that you hold, automatically the Bitcoin that you hold, it goes up in value, because overall the value of Bitcoins is going up and everybody in the world can see the price. Now, what would similarly happen is, the museum does not need to know you. Once you have got that particular, let's say we call it the Mona Lisa coin, and let's say you've got 1,000. Now, globally, everybody is being is reading about it, that okay, Mona Lisa is becoming more and more valuable, and then based on demand and supply, people may be ready to buy your coin for a higher amount. So the museum doesn't have to give you anything. But if a museum is going to give you part of the royalty or part of the viewing fees that they are charging their members, then that is going to be one complicated issue, that how do they actually give it to you? So as of right now, I'm not really sure how they would do that. We would kind of need to define a different kind of a token for that. ERC20, ERC721 may not really be able to solve this problem for us. Uh, so gold as a bond, paper gold. Oh, okay. Now, when we talk about gold as a bond, so for example, in India also, the RBI came out with this concept of sovereign gold bonds, where instead of holding the gold, you're holding a piece of paper, digital document, which entitles you to the value of gold. Now, I'll be very honest, I don't like that particular concept, and I'll tell you why. See, gold is always considered as a Very important store of value. Now, if you have money in the bank or you have currency notes, they can always be demonetized, or your bank balance can always be taken away by the government, right? But gold, if it is with you, cannot be taken away. So, from that perspective, if we talk about paper gold, it's not really solving the problem. Then there is always that risk that when we look at these gold bonds, so what happens to them is it's for a particular period of time. At the end of that time, they don't give you the gold, they will give you the price of the gold. So, suppose I buy a gold bond today and it expires on 31st March 2030, as an example. What they will do is they will calculate the average price around that time, and then on the last day, I get that much money. But suppose the value of the gold crashes at that time for a few months, I will end up making a huge loss because I don't have an option here. I'm not going to be given gold. I'm only being given the price of the gold at that time, and it may have crashed. So from that point of view, I always feel gold is better to hold on your own. But there is always the risk that it could be stolen, or someone could give you gold which is actually having some other metals inside it. So you think you have 1 kg of gold, but actually you may have 90% of that only. So those are some of the risks that could be there in physical gold. Okay, this is an interesting question. Could we bring in major change by tokenizing our monuments or temples? That's a very good point. So, I think it's from Sima Kiran. So, in fact, that's something that I also believe is a very good use case. That if we tokenize a monument, then people can contribute money which can be used to improve the state of that, so that more tourists are attracted to it. And of course, then the profits which are generated can also, a percentage goes back to the token holders. I think this is a very good use case, and in some ways we can kind of consider it to, like when the government makes a highway, then over a period of 20 or 30 years, somebody is going to be collecting the toll, because every time a car goes on it, they pay some toll that goes to the people who have built it also. So I think something similar could be done, where we identify these monuments and people pay for the tokenization, and then you get a part of the revenues as your return. Now, while this is okay for monuments, I don't think it will work for temples and other religious places, because those are not for profit commercial entities, right? So, those are what we consider as the not for profit, because there is a lot of religious sentiment. But when it comes to monuments, I think definitely it's a very good idea, and it could definitely be done. Let me take some other questions. Okay, there's another question from Seema Kiran. This could help these places be maintained as high-end facilities for visitors, thus increasing their revenue and the value. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. Now, considering that these monuments are a property of the government, so you have the archaeological survey, they basically control these. So it would be up to them to tokenize this. But I think it's an amazing use case. And I would love to invest in something like this if it does come. Anish says they can make a token that is mintable, and they can reduce the token to make the price high, and that's how the issuer can manage the price of tokens in the. So sure, that's a good point you have, but when we talk about reducing the tokens, right now the question is how. The token has been given to you and it is in your wallet. Now, how is someone externally going to delete your tokens? That's a very risky situation. And in fact, when we talk about algorithmic stable coins, like if you recall Terra Luna, well, that's how algorithmic stable coins work, but the whole system collapsed and the coin went to virtually zero. So I'm not at all in favor of any smart contract being able to delete coins owned by the token holder. What is in your wallet, nobody else should be able to delete. So I don't think that's the right approach. One approach you can look at is what Binance Coin does, or BNB, where they burn coins, but they buy the coins out. And they have announced it in their white paper right at the beginning that regularly we will buy back coins, burn them or destroy them, and thereby increase the value. So I think they started with 200 million coins and they will keep burning till only 100 million are left. That is a good approach. But a smart contract being able to delete your coins, extremely risky proposition. Hope that answers your question. Let me take the next one. Omkar says, take a sculpture or underrated painting, which is not popular. But if a certain community is attached to it and they are driving the tokenized painting prices up, will it? Well, that's definitely an interesting point, and that could always happen. That's why when we talk about art, we usually talk about the more famous ones. But you know what? Let's be fair. The famous paintings are already valued very high. What about the budding artists? Someone who's just starting out. It is not very easy for artists to make money. And I think if we start to tokenize, I think it would benefit a lot of the budding artists also. So I'm in favor of not so famous paintings being tokenized. I mean, I like the concept of investing in art and even putting it up in your home. But if it's tokenized, people may not be comfortable if some random person owns it. They may only trust it if a trusted museum or custodian holds it. Let's take another question. How can we do this tokenization? So I think your name is Hamza. Can you clarify which use case you're talking about? Are you talking about art or are you talking about the monuments? This question that you asked. Someone says that I could be a stakeholder of Taj Mahal. Well, definitely. So, if the government of India, which is the owner of the Taj Mahal, decides to tokenize the Taj Mahal, and then there's a fees that every tourist who wants to enter it pays a fees, and there's a higher fee for foreigners and a lower fee for Indians, for example. Now, as a token holder, the government could say X amount of the fees could go to you. And I think something like the Taj Mahal could definitely get a very good response because it is a famous monument globally. And the money that is raised could be large and it could actually be used to improve the entire city of Agra also and making it more tourist friendly, attracting more people there. And I think it's a very good idea. In fact, why don't you guys tell me? Would you be interested in buying tokens of the Taj Mahal if it gives you partial ownership as well as rights in the revenues that come from it? Would you be interested in it? Give me a yes or a no if you guys would be interested in tokens of the Taj Mahal. I'll wait for your answers. In the meanwhile, I'll take another question. So another interesting question from Simagran. I think something could be, no, where is it? Representing sports people. Okay, for budding sports people who do not. So definitely, Simagran, that's an interesting point of view, right? When we talk about, say, a sports person, but now let me tell you some of the problems in that. See, the sports person is a human being, right? So how are you going to tell that person to pay you money, right? At most, you are going to have some kind of a civil contract, but if the person doesn't pay you, the sports person, so you funded the sports person's career, and now the person doesn't pay you, what are you really going to do about it? So when it comes to things like museum, we are trusting a custodian or a large third party, but when it comes to sports people, we are trusting individuals, and trying to get our money out from an individual is always going to be a legal complication. Now, there are certain communities in the world and they operate in a very interesting manner. So, suppose there is a very talented youngster in the community or that particular religion, and he or she wants to become a doctor but doesn't have the money to do that. People of the community will sponsor, pay the entire fees and living expenses. That person becomes a doctor, and then for the rest of his or her life, that person gives 10% of the earnings back to the people who invested in his or her career. Now, this works in certain small communities because if you don't pay, then the community kind of throws you out. You will not probably get married into the same community. So there is a social pressure on people to fulfill their obligation and pay back. So for the sports person example, unless there is such kind of a social pressure, it would be a risky kind of a tokenization. So I can see some of you are very positive on, say, buying tokens of the Taj Mahal. So definitely, I hope the government of India one day does decide to tokenize some of these monuments. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll just wait for a minute or two, and then if there are no questions, we'll end the session. So very soon, I'm going to be doing a dedicated session on whiskey investing. I'm calling it the Whiskey Investing Masterclass. So it will not be on the coming Friday, but most probably on the 1st of September, which is a Friday. So I'll let you know more details about that. That will go deep into whiskey investing. What are the kind of ways in which we do valuation of, say, whiskey casks, and what are the things that you need to keep in mind while investing there. Sivakiran has another question. What do you think about tokenization of farmlands? Okay, very good point. So I am extremely bullish on all sorts of real estates. And of course, real estate includes agricultural property. And I think it's a very good thing. Now, in most states in India, a company is allowed to buy a farmland. So the process is simple. We could take a be bought over by a company, and then the shares of the company is what you and I will then buy as tokens. So we are not technically tokenizing the farmland. We are converting the ownership of that farm to a company, and then we are tokenizing the shares of the company. And of course, we could also say that whatever is grown on that particular farm, whether it is berries, vegetables, fruits, anything, that part of the profits of that also go to the token holders. I think it's a very good idea. If any of you are working on tokenization of farmlands, do let me know. I'd love to be a part of that project. Uh, Let me take another question. Again, though, is how we can help small holding farmers. Okay, so in small holding, we wouldn't ideally tokenize each small farm. Let's say it's few acres. We would combine multiple of them, and ownership would go to one company, so that it becomes a little economically feasible. Because if you tokenize a very small farm, the revenues may be too low, and investors may not be very interested in it. Someone says it turns out to be an easy way to raise money from the market, an IPO that doesn't require listing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's ultimately what tokenization is. It's kind of like an IPO, which you don't need to get listed on a stock exchange. So, definitely a lot of the complex processes involved in IPO and the cost, IPOs cost crores of rupees to do. That kind of gets taken away when we talk about tokenization. And that's the reason tokenization is picking up so much. Okay, I have a really long question here. Let me read that out. It's from Shantanu. Masterworks, okay, is fractionalizing blue chip artworks through shares. They started out in 2017. Oh, okay, that sounds really interesting. Well, I don't really know about it. So Shantanu in the comments has put in a lot of such points. So you all can see the different ones that he's talking about, and maybe we could go and check this out. I haven't had a chance to look at this particular platform, but I'll definitely have a look at it. Thanks for that, Shantanu. Sure, Simakiran, do feel free to connect with me. And any of you, if you are working on any kind of tokenization use case, do get in touch with me and I'd love to help you guys out. I run a particular something called the blockchain 30-day sprint, where I help people working on tokenization use cases to go from idea to an MVP, the minimum viable product within 30 days. You don't really have to spend on that. So do get in touch with me if you want to do that. And it's very important, if any of you are building tokenization related products, don't look at building the complete end product. Start with the absolute basic features which your customer would find useful. So we call that as an MVP, or a minimum viable product. So I would say start with that, then see what kind of traction you are getting in the market. If you are getting traction, then you can look at building out the final product, raising financing. But MVPs don't really require that much of money, so you could do it with just your own bootstrapping also. So do keep that in mind. And if you have any suggestions for what topics we could cover in future sessions, or if some of you would like to come on the live session with me, just get in touch with me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter, and I'll definitely give you a invite for that. So if there are any other questions, let me know. If there are no questions, then I'll see you guys next Friday at the same time. That's 3 p.m. India time. Shantanu has shared a URL, so thank you for that, Shantanu. I'll have a look at it. Masterworks.com, and the rest of you also can have a look at that. Masterworks.com. Sure, I'll have a look at it. By the way, Shantanu, have you invested in through that site? I mean, if you could share your experience with that. So I'll also definitely have a look at this particular site. Art investing for all. Okay. Seems interesting. I'll definitely see that. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.